everyone, and welcome back to another video. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jenna Van Mourik, and I'm an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. But of course, my real job is actually being an English tutor at the collegiate writing level, which means that every day I tutor students on how to improve their craft of writing, improve their engagement of research, improve their sources, and just all kinds of things within the field of academic writing when it comes to writing strong essays. Typically here on YouTube, I only talk about books, my personal fiction writing, and the fiction books that I'm enjoying. But after I mentioned my tutoring jobs several times on social media, some of you guys reached out and said that you would be interested in hearing some more YouTube videos, maybe not necessarily on fiction writing or storytelling, but on academic writing. And of course, I'm happy to oblige. I'm a firm believer in giving the people what they want, so that's exactly what I'm going to be doing in this new series. So don't worry though if you're just here for the fun fiction content, the bookish tags, the hauls, and all of that, because I will still be doing those weekly. This will just be an additional video each week in addition to my regularly scheduled bookish programming. Although if you are here for just one of these videos a week, whether it's the reading video or the writing video, I hope you'll stick around for the other as well and watch them both just to see. You may never know what you could discover or learn. In this series, I'm going to be breaking down my actual academic essay writing strategy, and this is how I've approached writing essays since I was pretty much in junior high. I was blessed with amazing teachers throughout my academic career who really poured into me and encouraged me to pursue a higher level of learning and fine-tune my writing process, and they were a huge formative influence on my life. And I've had opportunities to fine-tune this process as I've pursued my bachelor's degree in English at California Baptist University. I've also had practice teaching these strategies at my tutoring position, so I feel like I'm pretty well qualified to speak on this topic. In this series, we're actually going to be focusing on an essay that I've previously written. It's an essay that I've turned in, it's an essay that I've written, I've gotten feedback on it. I am proud to say it was a high A paper. I even posted about it on social media right over here. If you don't know where to find me on social media, I'm on Instagram and pretty much everywhere else at Jenna Van Mourik. Very easy to find me. It's just my name. The fun part of this series is that I actually saved every single draft of that paper, so I'll actually be able to show you with examples how I built that essay from the ground up. It was meant to be an 8 to 10 page academic research paper, researching a topic of my choice, so that's kind of where it came from, a little bit of background on the assignment that we're going to be referring to throughout this series. This series is going to be 6 videos long, so that's one new video every week for 6 weeks on how to build an essay. We're going to cover things like pre-writing, outlining, drafting, all of that fun stuff. But I do realize that if I'm only uploading one video per week, then it will take several weeks for me to complete this series of tutorials, and many of you may not have several weeks before your next academic essay writing project is due. So I'm very excited to tell you guys that I am now offering a free PDF downloadable resource, which is, again, completely free. Did you hear me the first time? It's free. You can use this workbook to plan, draft, or complete virtually any academic writing project, whether it's a research project or a literary analysis or a personal essay or anything in between. The workbook outlines my personal process in full detail, and I've truly spared no expense when it comes to coming up with the definitions, the tips, the tricks. I've included several examples. I worked very hard on this project, so I highly, highly, highly recommend you check it out if you're in any form of schooling. Even if your major isn't necessarily writing, chances are if you're in college or even high school, for you high schoolers out there, I think this could apply to you as well. You're going to have to do writing assignments, whether you're majoring in writing or not. You're going to have to write an essay, and I truly think that this workbook breaks down the essay writing process. It makes it a lot more easy to understand, a lot less overwhelming. It'll help you really organize your thoughts, and even if you only use the workbook once, it will give you the knowledge and equip you with knowledge that you can then pull up later during any writing assignment that you'll just be able to retain, and again, it's free. So how do you get this essay workbook that includes things like thesis statements, paragraph structure, outlining, and all of that kind of thing? It's very simple. All you have to do is go to my website, that's www.authorjennavanmourik.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. Once you've subscribed to my newsletter, you'll get a fun little welcome email with the password. There's going to be a secret password, so please, once you've subscribed to my newsletter, Don't give it away to anyone. This is strictly for newsletter subscribers only. All you have to do is sign up, get a little welcome email saying, hey, thanks for subscribing to my newsletter. Here's your super secret password. And then you'll go over to the resources tab on my website. When you go to that resources tab, you'll see that there are 3 sections. There is a for readers tab, a for writers tab, and a for students tab. So all of this information and so many other worksheets and academic helps are going to be under the for students tab for free. All you have to do is sign up for my newsletter. This is a password protected page, so you have to have the password to access it. And this page also, FYI, works best on a computer or a desktop or a laptop. It doesn't work very well on mobile because obviously this is going to be resources that you're most likely going to be downloading onto your computer to print for later, or when you're working on an essay and you're going to be doing that on your computer. So practically speaking, this page works best on computer. If you're on mobile, you might not be able to access all of the downloadables and the documents and the information that's on there. But it really is that easy to get access to it, and there really isn't any reason why not. So if you want to get ahead, or maybe you aren't interested in watching this full series, or you don't have time to watch this full series, be sure to go over to my website, go to the for resources tab, sign up for my newsletter, enter that password, and you'll be set up with all kinds of information. There's also underneath the for readers tab a complete index of my YouTube videos about books and some books that I recommend and some fun little bookish handouts for you guys to download as well. And in the for writers tab, there's going to be all of my outlines and templates for series Bibles and things like that in the downloadable section for the writers tab. So there is a little bit of everything in this for you guys. And of course, an additional bonus is that you will get a special little newsletter every month from me. I only email you guys once a month unless I have a super special or exciting announcement. So it really isn't going to be super overwhelming to sign up to my newsletter. And then once you have those resources, you'll be set for academic life. Don't forget to stick around though and watch these tutorials, because I'm actually going to be going in depth and showing you guys how you could apply the tools and tips in this workbook to an actual essay, aka my essay. So without further ado, let's just get into the first part of the academic writing process. The first phase of academic writing is pre-writing. So that's right, folks, you're going to need to do a lot of writing before you even begin the actual writing. What you do before you start drafting is a pivotal part of the academic writing process, because it will set the tone for your entire project. It'll help you be prepared, and in the long run, it'll help you formulate a plan and develop your ideas so that your essay comes across less rambly and more structured and organized. I have quite a few tips and tricks for when it comes to pre-writing, but the first one is brainstorming. Obviously, the first part of your essay and writing an academic essay is, of course, going to be coming up with a topic. So I highly recommend getting out a piece of paper, because I like to do this stage by hand and just writing down or scribbling down any topic that comes to mind. This is especially great if you get to choose the topic that you're writing on, but even if you don't get to choose, you should still start brainstorming ideas, because for instance, you may be assigned a topic that is very broad, such as World War II, but if you want your essay to be well-rounded, you're going to want to make sure that your essay's topic is specific. So rather than World War II, try to come up with more alternative ideas to research and study more in depth in your essay. For instance, you could write an essay on women who fought in World War II, or pivotal battles in World War II, or what were the United States efforts during World War II. Do you get the idea? Another thing that you should do when you're brainstorming is phrase your ideas as questions. Why I recommend doing this is because your essay is essentially going to be answering a question. It's going to be explaining a problem or answering a question by someone, and you're going to need to have an idea of what that is so that you can know all the possible answers and counter arguments to each point that you make. So instead of just writing an essay on women in World War II, you could write an essay on what was the role of women in World War II? For my essay specifically, I wrote down ideas like biblical fiction, Christian fiction, and the author Misu Andrews, because I wanted to write an essay about biblical fiction, which is one of my big passions, because as an English major, this course that I just took for this essay was a prerequisite to my capstone, and my capstone project is really going to be where I focus on defining where I want to take my degree in the future. For me, of course, that is the fiction publishing industry, so I wanted to do a research project on an area of fiction publishing that I'm really interested in, and for me that was biblical fiction and Christian fiction, and I wrote down several author names as well that I thought were very prominent or key to these genres, so authors like Misu Andrews or Tessa Afshar or Connie Lynn Cassette were some others that I mentioned. And the question that I was then able to develop from these ideas, which I then answered throughout my research paper, was where did biblical fiction come from and what has contributed to its recent rise in popularity? So that's how I was able to really focus my essay and narrow down and define my exact topic. So let's move on to free writing. Free writing isn't necessarily a necessary part of the writing process, but I highly recommend that you do it if you have the time, because what makes free writing so valuable is that it really gets your imagination going. And for me, oftentimes what I write during a free writing session can later be worked into my introduction paragraph or some other area of my essay. One sentence that I free wrote while I was brainstorming ideas actually ended up becoming a part of my thesis statement, which I'm going to show you later in this video. So once you've narrowed down your topic, just write down anything that comes to mind related to that topic, because you never know how it might be used later. The third part of pre-writing is drafting a thesis statement or introduction. This is possibly the most important part of the pre-writing process because the thesis will guide your entire essay. I've had many professors tell me at the collegiate level that a person should be able to read your thesis statement alone and feel like they've read your entire essay from cover to cover. Your thesis will also play a pivotal part in the drafting process because you should be able to read your thesis and know what you'll need to cover in each body paragraph in order to develop that thesis more fully. In my workbook, Write Your Essay, an academic planning workbook, the thesis statement actually covers 3 full pages of just me pouring out information on how to build a good thesis statement, what your thesis statement should contain, and all of that stuff, because I believe it is the most important part of your essay. So you really want to check that out if you struggle to write thesis statements, because I know that a lot of people do. Writing a thesis statement feels weird, and a lot of times it's really easy to just rely on the generic, this essay will explain how women interacted in World War II, what women interacted in World War II, and what women's roles were in World War II. And that's it. That's your thesis statement. And there's nothing wrong with a thesis statement like that because it's very clear and very direct. But eventually your professors may require that you challenge yourself more and maybe state your thesis in a more strongly worded way that goes beyond, this essay will explain X, Y, and Z. Essentially, the way I like to explain thesis statements to people who are struggling is that it's like a roadmap for your reader. So when you think of a roadmap, for me personally, because I'm old, I think of MapQuest. I think of actually having to print out a set of directions from the internet in order to know where we were going. Things that would say, turn left here, after so many miles, turn right onto this street, and so on and so forth, because it would explain to you where you started, which was your address, where you were going to end up, and then all the steps that you would be taking to get there or the stops you'd be making along the way. Your essay is similar because your introduction explains the topic or where you've started. Your thesis statement will explain your argument or stance, so that's like the main point or where you want to go, how you want to develop your thoughts. And all of your body paragraphs will be points that you make or stops that you take along the way to get from your starting point to your conclusion. A thesis statement is important because while you already know your thought process, all the points you want to make, and why you're planning to make the claim that you'll make, your reader doesn't. And it's your job as the writer to make those connections for the reader. You truly want to show them how you're doing this. Don't just say that something is the way it is because it is. Show them why and how, the reasoning behind that. And your thesis statement is really going to be a pivotal part of that process and that interaction between you as the writer and your audience. Even if your audience is only rhetorical or just your professor and not actually an audience that exists that you can actually talk to. Again, you already know the inner workings of your mind and your thought process, but your reader doesn't, so they're going to need your thesis statement like a roadmap to navigate the inner workings of your mind. It will help them get a rough direction of where you're heading with your ideas so they don't get lost along the way or confused at some point in the middle of your essay about what on earth you're talking about. The graphic that you're seeing on the screen right now is actually available for download independent from my workbook. So even if you don't want to go through the whole workbook or you just want a quick little resource on thesis statements, you can actually download this graphic right here, and it will just really quickly be able to remind you of how to formulate a thesis statement. So the necessary things that you're going to need in your thesis statement are things like subject, your stance or argument that you're going to be making, and then the main points that will preview what you'll go more in depth about in your body paragraph. So you can download that as well from the 4 resources in the resources for students tab of my website, and save it so that you have it whenever you want to refer to it for organizing or narrowing down your thesis statement. So now I'm going to show you guys some of my own free writing that I did during this course, and how I turned my free writing into an introduction paragraph and a thesis statement, because actually when I free wrote, I was able to free write my entire introduction. I didn't necessarily write it in order, and it was by no means perfect, but I wrote down all these different sentences, and I was like, you know what? All these could work really well together as an introduction. So I was able to revise them and create this. So for my essay, I decided that I wanted to take a critical look at the evolution of Christian biblical fiction, how it was formed, what some notable authors within that category have achieved, and then also why it's popular today, or why it's growing in popularity. So that's kind of where my title comes from, which you can see here is From Erotic to Ecclesiastic, a critical look at the evolution of Christian biblical fiction. And then you can see these sentences all right here were all from my free writing phase. So I was able to adapt them and revise them in order to develop them into a more polished introduction. But again, this is still my rough draft. So you'll see throughout this series how my introduction changes drastically over time, because this was very, very rough, and I received some great feedback from my instructor and from some trusted peers about how I could tighten this and focus it a bit more. But basically what you'll see down here, I've highlighted in yellow my thesis statement. And the majority of this introduction here for me was explaining background knowledge, because I knew that my audience, which would be literary critics in this case, rhetorically speaking, might not know what biblical fiction is, because most people don't. That's why I have an entire YouTube channel to explain it. But essentially, I talk about the history of biblical fiction, which really, in my opinion, began with older novels like the 1880 Ben-Hur, which is a classic, originally published like over 100 years ago now, which is a long time, by Lew Wallace, and then how in the 1940s and the 50s we got a lot of biblical film adaptations, such as the film adaptation of Ben-Hur, and Douglas's The Robe, which renewed cultural interest in biblical fiction or biblical storytelling. But in my opinion, the pivotal moment for biblical fiction as a genre was when Anita Diamant published The Red Tent in 1997. And that's kind of what my whole essay is going to start at. It's going to start by analyzing The Red Tent and what made The Red Tent so popular. And then what is the genre landscape, the landscape of Christian biblical fiction publishing and biblical fiction publishing looked like since Anita Diamant. So how did she change the landscape for biblical fiction? Because really, if you look at biblical fiction, typically it was, for the most part, a male-dominated genre with stories like Ben-Hur, right? Because the main part of that story is Judah Ben-Hur and his exploits, and you don't really see, there are a lot of great female characters in that, and there's a lot of female characters that have been adapted over and over again in different film adaptations, but the main part of the story is the guy's viewpoint, because the Bible is primarily about male. You mostly read men's stories there. But what Anita Diamant did was, for really like one of the first times in history, she focused specifically on a female story in the Bible and brought in a feminine perspective. Whether or not you agree with it, it was highly controversial, but it was popular, and it did expose this kind of open field within the publishing industry that was like, hey, there aren't a lot of books about that, so maybe we could expand on that more and grow that genre. And eventually it did, and it became what we know biblical fiction as today, which is basically the whole premise of my essay. And my thesis statement reads, The Red Tent incited a polarizing literary movement amongst Christian writers. Since then, the genre has exploded, but critics wonder why. The answer is simple. These new stories forego sexual experiences in favor of spiritual experiences, a form of faith-filled inspiration of which readers can't get enough. So essentially, you can clearly tell that from my thesis statement, I'm going to be talking about the Red Tent. I'm going to be talking about how it was polarizing, how it incited a critical movement, and then explaining why it's so popular today, which is for the most part, because these books are far more inspirational in nature. Biblical fiction, modern biblical fiction, is inspirational. It isn't necessarily focused on dark things or sexual themes that you see in a lot of mainstream fiction, but it's more spiritual, and it's more about discovery of self and discovery of a higher power and inspiration and faith, and how those things can kind of encourage readers, which is something that makes biblical fiction fit into a niche genre. So you can very clearly tell from that basically how I developed my thesis, and it will develop more. That's another key tip that you're going to want to remember, because your thesis statement may change. You may find that at the end of the essay writing process, your thesis statement really doesn't fit your finished product anymore. So just be prepared for your thesis statement to change, but it's a good starting point, because from this, I knew exactly what I needed to research. I needed to research the red tent. I needed to research the criticism surrounding the red tent, and I needed to research popular biblical fiction today and what makes it unique. So that involved reading a lot of biblical fiction, which was easy for me, but also recording that information. And that kind of guided my paragraph structure as well, because I knew that the first part of my essay would probably discuss the red tent. The second part, body paragraph of my essay would discuss the criticism, and the third body paragraph would discuss recent attempts at biblical fiction, and so on and so forth. So it will really guide your whole essay, and it will also set the tone for your essay. And that's just an example of how pre-writing can affect your whole introduction. And I was able to write my introduction in one sitting thanks to pre-writing. So for instance, this first sentence here: Christian literature has existed for years, as far back as many centuries ago, when it was commonly believed that literature wasn't worth reading if it didn't have Christian subtext. That was the first sentence that I pre-wrote down in my notebook, which I don't have the exact page open here, but this is my notebook that I use for most of my school planning, and it's just a plain yellow notebook, but that came from here. That was the first sentence I wrote, and from there I kind of knew what direction I needed to take it in. So that's just an example of how that can improve your essay writing process. So there you have it. That is my personal pre-writing process that I have used for nearly every single academic writing project that I've been assigned, and also a few extra tips and tricks that I love sharing with the students that I tutor. Next week, we'll be talking about part 2 of the academic writing process, which in my opinion should be research. We'll move into the research phase and talk all about finding sources, organizing your sources, and documenting your sources, so collecting the bibliographic information. Don't forget that some of the graphics you've seen in today's video and also the workbook are available for free on the resources tab in my website. All you have to do is sign up for my newsletter at www.authorjennavanmourik.com to gain access. If you enjoyed this video on pre-writing for academic projects, then don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. And if you are not already subscribed, go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit the little bell icon so that next time I upload part 2, you are able to be notified and you know exactly when it's coming out. If you absolutely cannot wait for the rest of this series though, then be sure you download that free 25-page workbook, Write Your Essay, via my website today, because it will be able to very quickly walk you through everything you need to know when it comes to academic writing. So this workbook is going to be full of all kinds of activity sheets, informational graphics, definitions, and examples to make the approach to essay writing so much easier. And I kid you not, you do not want to miss out on this resource. Have I said that enough yet? My name is Jenna Van Mourik. I'm an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, again, don't forget to hit that little like button on your way out. I post new writing videos every week, in addition to weekly reading and bookish fun videos. So if either of those are something that you're interested in, then be sure to stick around. You can also find me on social media at Jenna Van Mourik, and of course on my blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!